The morning sun had barely slipped over the pines when the trouble began, though folks later said the signs were there long before the first scream cut through the quiet timber. Out in those wild stretches of land where the wind carried the scent of pines, sap, and old dust, danger never walked on 2 feet alone. It hid in shadows, waded in brush, and sometimes, like that cursed day, lay hidden under fallen leaves. Folks called those woods peaceful, but anyone with sense knew peace was only the surface of things. Beneath it, old tracks, outlaw traps, and the echoes of long-forgotten crimes waited for anyone unlucky enough to step wrong. She wasn't thinking about danger when she crossed that lonely stretch. Her boots were dusty, her breath a little tight from walking all morning, but her eyes held a spark that told she wasn't one to scare easy. The frontier carved courage into people whether they wanted it or not. She had come through storms, rough trails, and long nights alone by a small fire. But nothing out there had ever made her heart race the way this stretch of forest did. It felt too still. Even the birds seemed to watch instead of sing. A horse snorted behind her. Its reins looped over a fallen branch where she had tied it. The horse sensed something before she did, stamping its hoof against the earth like it was warning her. She glanced back, brushed hair from her face, and whispered for the animal to calm. But the unease stayed. She kept walking, thinking maybe she was just tired, maybe she was imagining things. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Outlaws had been reported nearby. The sheriff in the last town warned travelers that traps had been laid in the woods by a man with a cruel mind, someone who liked luring folks off safe trails. She stepped forward again, boots sinking into soft earth. A sudden, tight snap broke the silence. Her breath hitched. The ground shifted. Then the world jerked out from under her. A hidden snare, woven strong and set low to the ground, clamped around her legs, dragging her down with brutal force. She hit the dirt hard, the pain cutting through her like a blade. Her cry tore into the stillness as the rope twisted, pulling her toward a rough cage trap built to hold something far larger than she was. The outlaw who set it hadn't planned on mercy. She tried clawing at the earth, trying to stop the pull, but the trap dragged her over dried sticks and roots. By the time it stopped, her breath was uneven and sharp. The forest returned to silence. That silence was the worst part. It made her feel small, helpless, like the trees themselves were closing in. She pushed herself up, but her leg throbbed too hard to move. She forced air into her lungs, trying to stay calm, but she was trapped. Alone. Far from help. Or so she thought. Somewhere deeper in the woods. A hunter moved with quiet steps, tracking the prints of a wild hog he'd spotted at dawn. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with weathered hands and a steady way of breathing that came from years of walking dangerous country. He carried a rifle slung across his back and a knife at his belt. The forest felt like part of him. He knew how to read broken branches, how to sense which shadows meant trouble, which were only shadows. That morning he followed the trail without hurry, till a sharp cry punched through the trees. He froze. His eyes narrowed. The sound was too human, too desperate to ignore. He shifted direction instantly, boots moving fast but quiet as he ran. Every instinct told him someone was hurt, and he'd seen enough outlaw tricks in his life to guess what kind of trouble lay ahead. When he pushed through a thicket and saw her, tangled in the outlaw's snare, his gut tightened. She was sprawled on the ground, trying to free herself, but wincing every time she moved. Leaves clung to her clothes. Dirt streaked her arms. Her breathing was shallow. She looked like she'd been trapped for hours instead of minutes. The outlaw had planned well. If he hadn't heard her cry, no one would have found her. He knelt beside her fast, hands gentle but sure, as he checked the ropes around her leg. She flinched. He lowered his voice, steady as the river in spring, and said, "Hold on, you'll live. I'm right here." Her eyes met his, fear and relief mixing together. She tried to speak, but only managed a faint breath. He worked quickly, cutting through the snare with his knife, trying not to hurt her more than she already was. Each strand of rope he sliced free felt like cutting through time itself, every second counting. She winced as the ropes loosened, but she kept her gaze locked on him, as if his voice alone kept her from slipping away. When the last knot broke, she collapsed back into the dirt, trembling. The hunter caught her before she could fall too hard. He slid one arm behind her shoulders, lifting her slow and careful. She felt warm and light against him, far too pale for someone who had been healthy an hour ago. She whispered something he couldn't quite hear. He told her to breathe. Told her she was safe. But he knew better. Nothing about this place was safe. Outlaws didn't set traps for no reason. Someone had planned this snare. Someone had watched the trail. Someone might still be watching. He scanned the trees, suspicion tightening in his chest. The forest that once felt familiar now felt like a stranger's land. Too many places for a rifleman to hide. Too many shadows that looked like figures if you stared long enough. The air felt heavy, as if danger hovered close. She tried to move her leg but gasped, pain flashing through her. He held her steady and told her not to move. She shook her head, frustrated but too weak to fight. Her heartbeat thudded against his arm. He could feel how fast it was. It's too fast. Shock was crawling up on her. He needed to get her away from there. Somewhere safe. Somewhere he could check her injuries without worrying about a bullet coming through the trees. But the trail behind them was narrow and exposed. The snare wasn't the only trap in these woods. If the outlaw returned, they'd both be targets. He lifted his head again, scanning the shadows, listening for the break of a twig or the rustle of boots. Nothing came. Only silence. Deep, cold, watching silence. He felt her fingers curl weakly around his sleeve. She whispered, "Is he coming back?" He didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. Outlaws always came back for their traps. He shifted closer to her, keeping his voice low and calm. "I won't let anything happen to you." But even as he said it, a faint sound echoed through the trees. A branch snapped, soft, intentional. His jaw tightened. Someone was out there watching, waiting. And the moment he tried to lift her, the moment he took one step away from the snare, the forest around them seemed to breathe in. As if bracing for what came next, the hunter tightened his grip on her shoulders. The woman's breath caught, and from deep in the timber, a slow, deliberate footstep answered. The sound came low and slow from the trees, like someone testing the ground with careful boots. The hunter felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He didn't move at first. He kept one hand steady on the woman's shoulder, the other resting near the knife at his belt. Her breath trembled, her fingers clutching his sleeve tight, waiting for him to tell her what to do. But he didn't speak. He needed to hear the woods before he risked a word. For a moment, the forest stood still. Then another sound followed, a breath, the soft thud of something brushing bark. Whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry. That made it worse. Only men with bad intentions moved quiet like that. Men who had planned every little thing long before their boots touched the ground. The hunter leaned closer to her ear, kept his voice low. "Stay close. Don't talk. If you hear anything, tap my arm." She nodded weakly. Her legs still throbbed from the outlaw snare, and every shallow breath told him she was fighting a rising wave of pain. He needed to move her, but not blindly. Not into an open trail where the outlaw could aim from the shadows. He looked at the trees behind them. Thick pines grew close together. Hard to walk through, but good for hiding. The only question was whether they were the only ones thinking that way. He eased her upright, keeping her weight against him. She bit back a gasp, but didn't cry out. There was strength in her, even in pain. The kind of strength that came from surviving long roads and lonely miles. He didn't know her story yet, but he could feel pieces of it in the way she held herself. She had traveled far. She had endured things. And something had pushed her straight into a trap meant for someone else. He took one slow step backward, dragging her with him. The leaves crackled faintly. He paused, listening. The woods breathed shallow around them. No reply came. The silent watcher didn't move. He kept going. It took time to pull her off the snare site. The ropes still scattered on the ground looked like a warning. The outlaw had made them with thick strips of hide, braided tight. It was the work of someone who knew how to trap game and people alike. Someone who didn't care whether the thing caught survived or not. When they reached a patch of deeper pine shade, the hunter eased her down against a slanted trunk. She breathed hard, gripping her knee. Sweat dotted her forehead. He knelt beside her, touching her leg gently, checking how bad the damage was. The bruising had already started. Ropes like that squeezed the blood right out of a limb. If circulation didn't return soon, she'd lose strength fast. She watched him with wide eyes, trying to stay brave. He spoke softly, still listening to the forest. Words wanted to come from her, but she held them back, just like he told her. It wasn't the moment for questions. When the woods gave him a sliver of quiet, he finally asked in a whisper, "How long were you walking the trail?" She swallowed. "Since sunrise." "Where were you heading?" She hesitated. "A ranch a day's ride north." "I was trying to reach someone their family, no." Her answer hung between them like a loose thread. He didn't pull on it yet. Not when danger was so close. But he filed it away. Nobody walked this land alone without a strong reason. And strong reasons had a way of dragging trouble in behind them. Another faint snap echoed through the trees. The hunter's eyes sharpened. That wasn't an animal. Animals moved without thinking. Humans paused. Shifted weight. Tested twigs. Someone out there was trying hard not to reveal themselves, which meant they knew he was here, helping her. And they were deciding whether to retreat or come closer. The hunter's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of game before. Years back, when a group of outlaws had tried to claim a stretch of valley as their own. He had watched them lay traps, herd travelers into tight corners, and strike from behind trees. The man who led that band had been smart, mean, and patient. He didn't rush his kills. He let fear do half the work. He was known for snares just like the one wrapped around her leg, the hunter remembered. A name whispered in saloons. Folks didn't say it loud. Some didn't say it at all. A man who made traps fit a person's heightened weight like a made-to-measure coffin. A man who didn't leave witnesses. The woods felt suddenly smaller. The woman looked at him, trying to read his face. She couldn't see the name he was thinking, but she felt the shift in his breath. Something was wrong. Something big. He looked at her leg again, trying to keep his voice level. "Can you stand if I lift you?" "I'll try." He slid one arm under her and helped her rise. She managed to stay upright but leaned heavy on him. Her leg trembled, not from fear, but from lack of blood flow. He needed to get her moving soon, or she'd collapse again. He scanned the woods once more, choosing a direction that offered more cover. The thickest brush lay to their right. Hard to walk through, but it would break line of sight. That was their best chance. As he shifted to move, she finally whispered the question she had held too long. Why would anyone set a trap out here? He wanted to say he didn't know, but she deserved truth, even if it wasn't full. Folks say an outlaw's been running this stretch of land. Someone who don't like strangers crossing his path. Her face tightened. Why would he care about me? He didn't answer. Not yet. Her injury wasn't the only thing weakening her. Fear could take strength just as fast. He got her moving through the brush. Each step hurt her, but she clung to his arm, trying to keep her weight off the worst of the bruising. The forest thickened around them with every yard. Branches brushed their shoulders. Pine needles fell like soft rain, and the ground sloped deeper between roots. But it was safer than open trail. No outlaw could shoot cleanly through this tangle. Still, something followed. They hadn't gone far when the hunter stopped again, head tilted. There it was. That same soft step. The same careful rhythm. Always behind them. Always close, but never close enough to see. The woman felt the tension go through him. Her breath sharpened. She whispered, "Is he tracking us?" He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. She held tighter to his sleeve, her voice unsteady but brave. Why me? Why this? Her question reached deeper than just the trap. There was something she wasn't saying. Something she carried. He could see it now in the way her eyes flashed toward the trees. In the way her fears weren't only about the outlaw, but about being caught by the wrong person at the wrong time. He slowed their steps, choosing words carefully. Trouble has a way of finding folks who've already been through enough. She didn't look at him, but he saw her jaw tighten, like she'd been holding truth back since the moment he found her tangled in the ropes. He waited. Then she whispered, low enough for only him to hear. Someone's been following me since I left the last town. I felt him watching. He kept his distance, but he never stopped tracking me. His blood chilled. An outlaw tracking a lone traveler wasn't something new, but an outlaw tracking her before she stepped into the snare meant this wasn't chance. She wasn't the wrong person at the wrong time. Someone wanted her caught. He kept walking, but he stayed sharper now. The danger wasn't only the trapmaker. It was whatever she carried with her. Whatever reason she had for heading to that ranch a day north, whatever trail she had left behind. The forest thinned just enough for faint sunlight to reach them. They stepped into a small clearing ringed with tall grass. He paused. Clearings were bad. Too open, too exposed. Before he could pull her back into the brush, a sound cracked the air. A distant metallic click. A rifle being cocked. He moved instantly, pulling her behind him, shielding her with his own body as he scanned the tree line. His pulse hammered. A cold rush moved through him. He couldn't see anyone, not yet, but the sound had come from ahead. The trapmaker wasn't behind them. He was waiting in front. The woman's breath hitched. She clung to his coat, her voice barely audible. What do we do? He didn't have an answer ready. The trees whispered around them, the air too still, the sun too bright on the clearing. He shifted his stance, keeping her behind him as his eyes searched every shadow. Then another sound rose from the pines, slow, heavy. A man's voice not close enough to see, but close enough to send a chill through the ear. You should have stayed out of my woods. The hunter felt her grip tighten, and the clearing seemed to close in around them, trapping them between an unseen rifle and a danger. They still didn't fully understand. The voice rolled out from the trees like smoke from a slow fire, thick and steady, carrying a tone that held no hurry. It was the kind of voice that belonged to a man who never felt threatened, a man who believed he owned every inch of land he walked. The woman stiffened behind the hunter, clutching the back of his coat as if the fabric alone could shield her from what was coming. The hunter didn't move. His body stayed firm, breath steady, eyes fixed on the tree line where the voice had come from. Every sense he had sharpened. The outlaw wasn't bluffing. That much he knew. A breeze rustled the tall grass, but nothing else moved. The outlaw didn't step out. He didn't need to. Men who had spent years trapping these woods knew how to use silence as a weapon. The hunter listened for any shift of weight, any click of metal. The woman leaned closer. He felt her shaking. He whispered low enough for only her to hear. Stay down. Keep behind me. She nodded, though her breath trembled. When she tried to shift her injured leg, she let out the smallest involuntary sound. The hunter's jaw clenched. That sound could betray their position. He lowered himself slightly, bringing her with him, guiding her into the grass just enough that she wasn't fully visible, but close enough that he could shield her if the outlaw fired. Then the voice came again, closer this time. You've got someone I need? Bring her out. The hunter's grip on his knife tightened. He wasn't armed enough for a long-range fight. His rifle was strapped across his back, but reaching for it now would give the outlaw exactly one clean target. He needed time. He needed cover. He needed the outlaw to talk, so he did what careful men did. He spoke slow. You set a snare meant to kill. She walked into it by accident. She's hurt bad. A cold chuckle rolled through the trees. Accident, sure. Let's say that the hunter's stomach dropped. So this outlaw knew her. He wasn't after any traveler. He was after her. That meant she had left something out. Something important. Something dangerous. The woman let out a faint breath and whispered against his shoulder. He knows my face. I think he's been following me longer than I realized. He didn't look back at her. He couldn't afford the distraction. But he felt the truth in her voice. The outlaw called again, more irritated. I'm giving you one chance. Send her out and walk away. I won't hunt you. Just her? The hunter almost laughed at the lie. Men like this didn't offer mercy. And even if they did, he wouldn't take it. He had seen the rope cuts on her leg. He had heard her cry out when the snare dragged her across the dirt. No man who set traps like that would ever keep his word. He shifted slightly, enough to position himself between two thicker tree trunks. If he moved fast, he could get her into the brush before the outlaw fired. But her injured leg made it risky. She wouldn't be able to run, and he wouldn't leave her behind. The woman tugged his sleeve gently, forcing him to look at her. Her face was pale, pain biting deep under her skin, but her eyes held something stronger than fear. She whispered, "You don't have to risk your life for me. He wants me. Not you." He kept his voice low. "That's not how this land works." But she wasn't finished. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what she carried. "I didn't tell you everything because I didn't know if I could trust you. But I didn't fall into that trap by chance. He set it for me. And he'll keep coming until he gets what he wants." "What does he want?" She swallowed hard. "Something I took from him. Something I can't let him have back." Before he could ask more, a sharp whistle cut the air. A warning. A command. Then a shot. The hunter shoved her down, lowering his body over hers. The bullet snapped through branches where his head had been a heartbeat before. Bark exploded behind him. Before the echo faded, another shot followed. This one hit the ground near his boot. He dragged her through the grass, using the slope to shield their movement. She bit back a cry as her injured leg scraped against the dirt. He didn't have a choice. They needed to get out of the open now. When they reached the tree line, he propped her against a pine trunk, breathing hard. She trembled in pain, gripping the bark. He checked the forest again. The outlaw wasn't firing blindly. He was firing to keep them moving in the direction he wanted, hurting them, just like he did with his traps. That meant something worse waited ahead. The hunter spoke quickly. "I need to know what you took." She hesitated, but only for a breath. "A ledger. From his camp. It has names, buyers, every deal he made. Enough to put him behind bars for the rest of his life if it reaches the sheriff." A ledger. The hunter felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Outlaws who kept ledgers were rare. Outlaws who guarded them with this much rage were worse. He asked, "Where is it now?" She touched the front of her dress near her. "Waist hidden, and he knows it." That meant she wasn't just a traveler caught in a trap. She was carrying the one thing that could destroy the outlaw's entire operation. No wonder he wanted her alive. No wonder he didn't shoot to kill. Yet, a twig snapped to their left. "Close." The hunter motioned for silence. He peeked around a tree. Nothing. But the sound was too sharp to be a deer. Then another twig cracked on the opposite side. They were being circled. The outlaw wasn't alone. The woman whispered, "He has others. I saw at least 3 near his camp. One with a scar across his head, one younger, one tall with a limp." The hunter cursed under his breath. 3 more men meant 3 more rifles. The odds were sinking fast. He scanned the woods again. They needed a place to hide. Somewhere narrow. Somewhere only one man could pass through at a time. A box canyon would help. A ravine even better. But what they had was thick timber and shadows full of gun barrels. A distant voice called out, "Bring her to me. I won't ask again." The hunter didn't answer. He knelt beside her instead. "You'll need to stay on your feet a little longer. Can you lean on me?" She nodded, though her face twisted in pain. "I can try." He helped her stand. Her legs shook but held. He guided her deeper into the trees, each step careful, each breath measured. The forest closed around them, thick and dark. The air smelled of sap and danger. He felt her tremble. Every sound snapped through her like a warning. Behind them, the outlaw's men followed slowly, spreading out to cut off their escape. The hunter could hear faint voices, low whistles, the rustle of leaves disturbed by boots. Then came a distant rumble. Thunder, the sky above the pines darkened. Wind swept through the branches. The air changed with it. A storm was rolling in. "Fast," the woman whispered, breathless. "Is that good or bad?" Storms mean noise. Cover tracks washed away. It's good for us, but storms also meant she'd weaken faster. Her injury couldn't take cold rain. He needed shelter. Something solid. A cave, maybe. A hunter's cabin. Anything, he thought through the land in his head. North of here, near the ridge, there was a half-ruined trapper cabin. Old, but still standing. If they reached it before the outlaw did, they'd have walls at their back, but getting there meant crossing a stretch of broken ground. Exposed ground, the sky cracked with thunder. Her grip tightened on his arm. He could feel her heart racing through her sleeve. She whispered, "Do you think he'll stop because of the storm?" He shook his head. Men like him don't stop, storm or not. Rain began to fall in slow, heavy drops. The forest dimmed, shadows deepening, until everything felt like night. The hunter took a breath and said, "We run for the ridge." She steadied herself, nodding even as pain dug deep into her leg. Behind them, a shout echoed, "There, they're moving." The outlaw's men had spotted them. The hunter tightened his grip on her hand, and together they plunged deeper into the storm-dark woods while danger closed in from all sides. The cabin still far ahead, the outlaw's shadow close behind, and the truth of what she carried threatening to drown them before they reached safety. Rain fell harder as they pushed deeper, the drops cold and sharp against their skin. The storm rolled over the ridge with a low growl, warning that they didn't have much time before it turned wild. The hunter kept one arm around her shoulders, guiding her step by step, as her injured leg dragged with every breath she took. She tried to stay quiet, but each stumble sent a tremor of pain through her, and he could feel her strength slipping. He didn't rush her, though danger pressed from every side. He matched her pace, steady and firm, trying to keep her upright long enough to reach the old trapper cabin he prayed was still standing. Behind them, through the rush of wind, they heard faint shouts. The outlaw's men were getting closer, following their tracks while the rain still allowed it. Soon the downpour would hide those tracks, but that worked both ways. If the storm washed away the path behind, it could wipe out their sense of direction too, leaving them wandering blind. He kept his focus sharp, watching for the leaning rock that marked the first part of the ridge trail. Thunder cracked overhead. The woman flinched and nearly slipped, but he tightened his grip, keeping her steady. "You doing all right?" he whispered, trying to keep his voice warm. Her breath shook, but she nodded. "Just keep going. Don't slow down on my account." He almost smiled at that. Even bleeding, even hunted, she still tried to shoulder more than she should. He guided her around a twisted pine root and lifted her over a small broken log. The storm wind howled, bending branches and sending needles swirling. He doubted the outlaw could see far in this darkness, but sound carried strangely in storms. Every step they made might echo farther than they liked. They reached a small rise in the land, and he spotted the leaning rock shape through sheets of rain. Relief warmed him for a heartbeat. But the feeling broke when a shout rose behind them. There up the slope, the woman froze. The hunter didn't. He lifted her again, forcing them forward until her legs pushed with him. They scrambled up the rise, boots slipping in mud, hands grasping wet roots and rocks. Every inch felt like climbing out of a deep river. When they reached the top, the wind hit them full force, whipping her hair across her face. She clung to his arm, her breath fast and shallow. He pointed ahead where the woods thinned. "The cabin is just past those trees." "We're close." She nodded, though her legs wavered beneath her. He pulled her onward, weaving between thick trunks and old brush. The storm swallowed most sounds now, but he still heard faint movement behind them. Men pushing through branches, getting closer with every second. The outlaw knew the woods better. He would know exactly where they were headed. As they neared the clearing where the cabin should be, the hunter slowed. Something felt off. The wind carried a scent that didn't belong to the storm or pine. Smoke, not the thick kind from a burning house, but a thin, sharp trail. A campfire, a recent one. He pulled her back behind a thick tree trunk, pressing a finger to his lips. She nodded and leaned against the bark to steady herself. The hunter peeked around the side of the trunk. There it was, the old trapper cabin. Crouched under the pines like a forgotten memory, the roof sagged slightly. One shutter hung crooked, and moss covered half the wall. But that wasn't the problem. In front of the cabin, ash swirled in a dying fire pit. Smoke spiraled upward, mixing with rain. Someone had been here very recently. Maybe still was, he whispered. Someone reached the cabin before us. Her breath hitched. He didn't know if it was fear or exhaustion. Probably both. She looked ready to collapse, but she held on to him with a stubborn kind of strength that made him tighten his arm around her. Could it be him? She whispered. He shook his head slowly. If it were the outlaw, he wouldn't have bothered hiding. He would have waited with a rifle pointed at the door. So who then? Another traveler. A trapper. One of the outlaw's men scouting ahead. Or maybe the cabin had been shelter to someone else desperate enough to brave the storm. He listened carefully. At first, only rain answered. Then, inside the cabin, a faint noise, a shift of wood. A footstep. Someone was definitely inside. He weighed his choices quick. They couldn't stay outside. The storm was growing colder. Her leg was swelling and she was trembling from pain and cold. If they didn't get her out of the rain soon, she'd pass out. And if she passed out, he couldn't protect her and fight at the same time. He leaned close to her ear. Stay behind me. No matter what you see, she nodded. He moved forward slowly, one step at a time, positioning himself in front of her as they approached the cabin door. Rain battered his back, but he kept his focus straight ahead. When he reached the doorway, he paused, lifted his hand, and pushed the creaking door open. The door swung inward. The room inside was dim, lit by the last flicker of a lantern someone had left burning. The air smelled of damp wood and old dust. A man stood in the corner, rifle raised, eyes wary. But the moment he saw the woman limping in behind the hunter, his expression shifted from tension to alarm. The hunter stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. Put the rifle down. We got trouble behind us. The stranger lowered the barrel, but only slightly. Who are you? And what kind of trouble? The hunter didn't waste time. A dangerous outlaw is tracking us. She's injured. We need shelter. If you don't want him finding you next, put that gun away and help us bar the door. The stranger studied them both. His clothes were ragged, dust-covered, and his boots were worn down. He didn't look dangerous, just tired. Human. A man running from something of his own. After a tense moment, he lowered the rifle. All right, quick, get in. The hunter guided the woman inside. She sagged against the wall, relief and pain washing over her in equal measure. The stranger grabbed an old wooden beam and helped the hunter brace it against the door. The storm beat harder at the walls, making the old wood groan. The woman whispered, Thank you. The stranger nodded stiffly, but kept his eyes sharp, assessing the hunter with caution. He asked, What's this outlaw want? Before the hunter answered, the woman spoke, her voice tired but clear. He wants what I took, and he'll burn the whole ridge down to get it back. The stranger stiffened. What did you take? She hesitated, glancing at the hunter. He nodded, encouraging her. She lifted her hand to the front of her dress, touching the hidden pocket. His ledger. Names. Deals. Proof that he's been trading with men who have no business being in these woods. The stranger let out a slow breath. The hunter could see the truth land heavy on him. Whoever this stranger was, he knew enough about outlaw dealings to understand the danger of holding that ledger. Thunder shook the ground beneath them. She flinched, gripping the hunter's arm. The cabin walls rattled with each gust of wind. Outside, through the storm, faint shouts rose again. Closer now. The outlaw had found their trail. The hunter moved to the window slit and peered out. Lightning flashed, revealing figures moving through the trees. 3 at least, maybe 4. They were spreading around the clearing. He whispered to the stranger, They're circling us. The stranger checked his rifle. I've got 6 shots. Not much, but enough to slow them. The hunter nodded. They weren't going to let the outlaw's men take the cabin easily. But even as he said that, he felt the woman sway. He caught her quick, helping her settle on an old chair. Her leg was swelling badly now, the bruises deepening. He touched her knee gently, feeling heat rising from the injury. She tried to smile through the pain. "I'm all right," she whispered. "You just do what you have to do." He shook his head. "You're not all right, but we'll get you through this. Just stay awake." She nodded and gripped his hand tight. Outside, a whistle cut through the storm, another, then another. They were signals. The outlaw was telling his men to take their positions. A heavy dread settled over the cabin. The stranger whispered, "He's going to rush the door." The hunter shook his head. "No, he's smarter than that. He'll try to burn us out, or draw us out." As if on cue, a spark lit in the distance. A torch lifted through the rain. The outlaw's voice echoed, cold and steady. "You can't hide in there. Bring her out now." The woman trembled, gripping the hunter's arm so tight it almost hurt. Her voice cracked. "He's going to trap us in here." The hunter knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Not if I make my move first." Another torch appeared. Then another, the stranger whispered. "They're surrounding the cabin." The hunter stood slowly, every muscle tight with purpose. The storm roared. The torches burned through the dark. The outlaw took a step closer, rain hissing off his coat, and inside the trembling cabin, the hunter's eyes hardened as he made a silent promise. He wasn't going to let the outlaw take her. Not while breath still lived in him. Not while hope still flickered through the storm. The moment was building, the danger closing in. The cabin trapped between fire, rain, and 4 armed men, and the final steps toward the coming. Climax had only just begun. The torches burned through the storm like angry stars, their flames fighting against the rain and wind. The outlaw's men moved closer in a tightening circle, shadows slipping between the trees, their voices rough and sure of victory. Inside the old trapper cabin, the hunter steadied himself. He wasn't ready to let the story end with fear or surrender. He looked at the woman resting in the chair, her face pale from pain yet still holding that quiet strength that had carried her this far. He had made a silent promise to her out there in the woods. He wasn't about to break it now. The stranger in the cabin checked his rifle again and whispered, "If we're doing this, we do it smart. They got the numbers, but the storm is on our side." The hunter nodded. Rain poured down in heavy waves, turning the clearing into a slick patch of mud. Movement would be harder for the men outside. Their torches hissed every time a gust of wind whipped sideways. The hunter could use that. He stepped toward the window slit and watched the outlaw approach. The man walked with a slow confidence, as if the storm itself bowed to him. His coat hung heavy, his hat low, but nothing about him trembled. He had caused too much suffering to ever second-guess his steps. He lifted the ledger she carried in his mind. The reason all this had started? A simple book filled with names, deals, and routes that tied him to crimes across half the frontier. She had taken it because she believed someone had to stop him. She had taken it knowing the risk. That alone made the hunter's resolve burn even brighter. The outlaw called out through the storm, his voice steady as stone. "Last chance. Bring her out and walk away. I'll let you live." The woman gave a faint shake of her head, knowing full well that was a lie. The hunter didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the stranger. "On my signal, you take the right window. I'll take the door." The stranger nodded, but before the hunter moved, he knelt beside the woman once more. She looked at him with tired eyes, worry pressing at the edges. "Don't go out there." "Not alone?" she whispered. "You don't owe me your life." He gave her a soft smile. "I'm not giving my life. I'm giving us a chance, and you're worth that." Her fingers tightened weakly around his wrist. "Be careful always." He stood, taking a deep breath as the storm beat harder against the cabin walls. He pushed the wooden beam at the door aside. The stranger positioned himself by the window slit, rifle ready. The hunter wrapped his hand around the door handle, feeling the cold iron bite his skin. The outlaw was only a short distance away now, torch raised high. His men flanked him, forming a rough half-circle. The hunter could see the outline of a rifle in the outlaw's other, and lightning cracked overhead. The hunter kicked the door open. The outlaw stepped back. Surprised for the first time since he'd appeared, the hunter burst out through the rain, sprinting across the mud. The outlaw fired. The shot whistled past the hunter's shoulder, tearing bark from the cabin wall. The stranger shot from the window, forcing two of the outlaw's men to scatter behind trees. The storm did the rest, blinding their aim with wind and rain. The outlaw fired again, but the hunter had already dropped low, sliding in the mud before rising with a burst of strength. He lunged toward the outlaw, grabbing him by the coat and slamming him to the ground. The outlaw's rifle flew into the grass. Rain hammered both men as they wrestled, rolling through mud and roots. The outlaw was strong, fueled by anger and years of cruelty. But the hunter had something he didn't. He had a reason to fight. A reason to stand between danger and the woman inside that cabin. They struggled fiercely until the outlaw ripped free. Pulling a knife from his belt, the hunter dodged as the blade slashed inches from his ribs. Lightning lit the sky, and for a heartbeat, everything paused, bright and sharp. The outlaw lifted the knife again, ready for a final strike. But a gunshot cracked through the storm. The outlaw's knife dropped from his hand. He staggered backward, clutching his shoulder. The stranger at the cabin window had fired true. The outlaw cursed and stumbled, reaching for the trees, but the hunter grabbed him and held him down until the rain soaked them both. The outlaw's men, seeing their leader caught, hesitated. Another clap of thunder shook the sky. The storm grew so fierce it nearly drowned out their voices. One of the men shouted something about retreating, and within moments they turned and fled into the woods, disappearing into the storm-dark pines. The hunter didn't chase. He pushed the outlaw onto his back and kept a knee pressed against him. The man struggled, but the fight had drained out of him. Rain poured over his face, washing mud into every crease. The hunter spoke through heavy breaths. "It's over." The outlaw glared, but he knew it was true. The stranger came out of the cabin, rifle trained on him. The woman watched from the doorway, holding the doorframe to keep steady. Her voice carried through the rain. "He's done enough harm. Let the law take him." The hunter nodded. She was right. Justice meant more than revenge. He tied the outlaw's hands with a strip from the man's own coat and dragged him toward the cabin. The outlaw cursed under his breath, but he didn't resist anymore. Inside the cabin, a stranger helped bind the outlaw securely. The woman sat back in her chair, breathing hard, but smiling softly when the hunter approached. He knelt beside her again, checking her leg. The swelling was bad, but she was still alert. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he corrected. "You're the one who carried the proof that'll end his whole operation." She reached into her hidden pocket and pulled out the ledger, worn from travel and rain. She placed it in his hands. "This belongs with the sheriff, and with you. You kept me alive when I had no one else." He closed the ledger gently. "I'll deliver it, and I'll make sure he sees a cell for what he's done." The stranger nodded. "I can help escort him. I'm headed toward town anyway." The storm slowed as the night passed, leaving a quiet heaviness over the woods. By morning, sunlight broke through the pines, warm and gentle. The woman could stand with support, and her pain eased enough for travel. They tied the outlaw to the stranger's horse, and together the three of them made their way toward the nearest town, their boots leaving fresh tracks in the softened earth. At the sheriff's office, justice came swift. The outlaw was locked away, and the ledger brought truth to light. Names were written down, charges made clear, and people across the frontier finally had a chance at peace. When the work was done, the hunter walked the woman to the porch of a quiet inn where she would rest until she healed. She looked at him with gratitude shining in her eyes. "You saved more than my life. You gave me my future back." He shook his head softly. "You fought for that future long before I found you. I only walked the last part with you." She reached for his hand. "You could stay, just for a while, until my leg heals. Maybe longer, if you want." He looked out at the bright morning, then back at her warm smile. The frontier held many trails, many dangers, and many stories. But sometimes, a man found one worth staying for. He squeezed her hand gently. I think I will. And in that simple promise, under the open sky and the soft call of the quiet town, a new beginning settled between them. A beginning not shaped by fear or running, but by hope, safety, and the steady warmth of two lives finally finding a place to rest. The storm had passed. The danger was done, and the future ahead looked brighter than either of them imagined when their paths first crossed among the pines.